I stumbled across this video by Pop Culture Detective, which I highly recommend you watch before checking out this video. I'll link it down in the description. This video goes into the relationship between superheroes and the status quo. And damn, the points in there really hit home. This was especially as I noticed that this scholarly study pertained specifically to the superhero genre, or the superhero subgenre of fantasies. On the screen, in comic books, and whatever other format the superhero is typically shown in. But this study can apply to more than just superheroes. We need to talk about that. My name is Amy Rosenfeld, and today we're talking about villains being the only people who want to change the world. The video that was made by Pop Culture Detective made me realize why I hate the overuse of the villain who has the good intentions but the bad means of achieving their good intentions and goals. It's because we don't see heroes doing that kind of stuff. Besides the obvious reasons of homogeny and who holds the powers within these narratives and the construction of them, I wanted to know a bit deeper as well. I wanted to see within my own story collections, particularly my books, because that's a physical manifestation of such things, what the trends were for these heroes. I can't include the villains because of course not all of them have a villain. And I discovered at the root of it all that the heroes who don't change the world are reactive characters. I think we often mistake reactive characters for being active characters. An active character would be going out there and making things happen on their own accord, starting up shit for the villains to clean up, in the case of a superhero, rather than just cleaning up the shit that the villains put forth. But superheroes are often portrayed as reactive. When something goes wrong, they are the ones to clean it up. When something threatens the sense of normality, they're the ones to bring back that sense of normality. Because I love my stats, I have gone through every single book that I have owned and read. I went through them all and determined from memory which of the protagonists were active and which ones were reactive. The number of books that I have read have double the number of reactive protagonists compared to active protagonists. Double the number of characters who are making sure their sense of normality is maintained rather than changing the world for the better. Now, I haven't gone through the villains of the books, but the villain is obviously the most active character in any piece of media. They are the ones who are making plans to try and combat the protagonist in some form. They are the ones who have made or are making change. And their changes never last. Even if they are villains with changes that we would want to have happen. And if the villain had a bad means but a good motive, what does that say? If the hero agrees with the villain in some form, why don't they carry out their plans but with a rehash to make it more morally acceptable? But going back to these active heroes, most often when we see an active hero, it is in dystopian fiction. Quite often, the issue that we see within a dystopian society is something that we in our present day society automatically deem immoral, something we should collectively not want to happen. All of humanity being immortal, the glorification and media output of games in which people are killing each other, humanity becoming collectively infertile. And the protagonist of the story is in fact the one who implements that change and pushes some kind of revolution or movement to make sure that the change happens. But the better world is just a world that more closely resembles our own. That's not the same case as a superhero movie in which the status quo gets defended. This is a case of the heroes creating that status quo again, because it is established that we went away from that status quo and we're coming back to it again in the future. History almost repeating itself. Now, I'm not here to hate on the dystopian genre. Some of my favorite books in recent years have been dystopian, and also some of my least favorites. But the ones that I am most familiar with involve turning the world in some form more like our current one. And this is quite often young adult fiction that is more dystopian. where it is a teen or somebody under the age of 18 who is leading this revolution and making this change. So in turn, the dystopian fiction is trying to tell you that this is a bad idea of this world, this is what it should actually look like. Our world does not have the problems that the dystopian society has, and we should be grateful for that. And we should be grateful that we don't have to fight for this stuff. But they ignore the fact about all the other things that we have to fight for in terms of rights, climate change. But at least you don't have to fight for your life in a gladiatorial pit. So with few exceptions, we never see our current world getting better. We never see an end result or something hopeful about the rights in our current world and the issues in our current world being solved. If we do see something being solved in our current world, say in an urban or a contemporary fantasy, then it's only the magical side of things that end up getting solved or made better. We don't see the impacts on the non-magical populace. This is straight up a major red flag, red flashing lights telling you this is homogeny. The people in this world who hold the most power have their perfect world or the thing closest to it. Thus, they think that the world as it is utopic. The people who want to make the changes in the world are the ones who see it as more of a dystopia, because the things they want to change will make them feel less at risk. And as it stands, the world that we currently live in is a straight white cis man's utopia. At least largely. Especially with the bunch of very scary legislations happening in the US. I feel very sorry and very scared for you all, my American friends, and I really hope something ends up happening to be able to reverse the effects that are currently affecting so many people's rights. And because of these people holding power, we don't really see them defending a minority agenda, even if they are minorities. And it makes sense when the distributors of these kind of media are renowned for not supporting minorities as much as they should be. So it gets even weirder when the villain is proposing a good social change, but they end up doing something that makes them seem murderous or immoral, and they end up getting defeated. So what ends up happening is the change never ends up happening. People who want to change the world, they were not going to succeed. The status quo and the people who maintain it are too strong. And you know it is too strong because it keeps getting reinforced in these stories. But what about the stories that do include heroes making a change? Reactive characters can be among them as well, but they just might not start off that way. But who puts the band-aids on the wound? And who makes the medicine to cure the disease? I went back through my books again to find out who changes the world that they are in for the better, whether that is their immediate circle and a very small world that they are a part of, or the entire world. The playing fields even out a little bit more, with 46% of heroes actively changing the world around them for the better, rather than just solving a crisis. So that does put a little bit more faith in me. But it also could just be some kind of data that discusses the kinds of books that I like to see. I have not included books that I either didn't keep or did not finish in this list. Wait, actually, I have a record over that. I spotted a trend. I have completed, yet did not want to keep, 19 books since January of 2022. And 14 of those books feature characters who did not successfully change the world for the better. I wouldn't know about my did not finishes, unfortunately, but that is interesting data that I like characters more who want to change the world, it seems. Or at least have less of a favor towards the ones who don't change the world. It's kind of hard to tell with only 46% of the books that I have completed being ones that had the world to change. And I've still got a ton more that I want to read. But a coincidence I have noticed is that the people who end up making these changes in the world happen to be minorities, whether that be female, neurodivergent, or non-white. Those are the main ones that I have represented as it stands. I should also say that within a series, the world ends up changing in the final book for the better. That's typically the moment when the world ends up, being at its best, is at the end of a series. This is because the status quo at the start of the series If it ends up being repeated, we're just gonna get into a repetitive cycle of the series starting over and over. The status quo must be changed at the end of the book to a better status quo. And those are the kinds of books in fantasy series, it seems, that I particularly like. But what about the books where a change doesn't happen? Quite often it could be that the book centers around an internal change and somebody changing inside to become a better person and eventually make these changing actions, kinda like the way that Scrooge acts in A Christmas Carol. But then there's shit like Harry Potter, books that I have gotten off my shelf, and I have mentioned this particular point at least once before. Harry doesn't make any changes that we know of to prevent another Lord Voldemort from coming in and making havoc in the wizarding world, where there totally could have been stuff to have done that. Or Avengers Endgame. They undo the snap that killed half the population, but then half the population still doesn't have the resources to survive. Nobody thinks to make a snap that will double the resources the population has so that the entire universe can in fact survive. And they don't do anything to stop the Infinity Stones from being acquired in such a way. Again, they don't like collect them and lock them in a vault and then throw the vault off somewhere weird. They just leave them in the exact place so that another Thanos can come in and make the snap happen again. And what do we know about Marvel Studios, who are owned by Disney, and Harry Potter, which was created by J.K. Rowling? One of them is a TERF, and the other is one of the more problematic media companies of our time. Both hold power over pop culture. Fucking disgusting. So the status quo that they put forth is caging us in a world that is never going to change. I'm not saying that every author who doesn't have their characters change the world for the better is problematic. I'm just saying this is something maybe we should pay more attention to, something that we should take note of. Is the status quo a book or series ends up finishing in a status quo that you want to be a part of? I'm not inciting some kind of change or action like I do at the ends of these problematic videos, because I'm not entirely sure what should end up changing. Because having reactive stories isn't bad. Fixing a crisis isn't bad. It is not a story that should be eradicated. But maybe we just need to be more careful with what our worlds look like when the crisis is over. This one is a little bit messy, I will admit, but it's just something that I wanted to talk about because it wasn't a perspective that I had seen prior to watching that video. And it's something that's making me rethink a lot of the ways that I write my stories. It has changed how I want ASTER'S CODA to end, for example. My book, which you can buy now in the description, I guess. I did not mean to make a segue into that, but it happened. But if you did enjoy this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you are new around here. You can ring that bell to find out when I post more creative content every weekend. And you can also check down the description for my TikTok, my Instagram, and my website. Stay creative, everybody, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.